Now, we can speak of shame objectively. And when we speak of it objectively, that means what is, it's the facts, objective facts. When we speak of shame objectively, we talk about we're all shameful because we all are in a fallen moral state. Everyone has shame. Objectively speaking, we're shamed because of our sin. Subjectively speaking, though, when we speak of subjective shame, that's the kind of shame that most of us think about. When we think about sexual sin and sexual abuse and our own sinful struggles, the things we try to keep hidden from people and from others. We think about how we feel. That's what we usually think about when we think of shame. Subjectively speaking, that emotion, that feeling, that in the pit of your stomach, in the core of your heart, how your soul hurts when you think about what you've done to others and what has been done to you. That's what we think about when we think about shame, is emotionally how we feel, subjectively how we feel. And that emotion comes from our guilt, comes from our sin, comes from what has been done to others. I want to make a clear distinction this morning. Objective shame, and this is important, especially for those of you who have been abused. Objective shame, that moral state, was earned. We earned it. You know how we earned it? We sinned. We fell. When sin entered the world through one man, it didn't just stick with Adam. We were born sinful. David tells us in the Psalms we were sinful even while we were growing in our mother's womb. Jeremiah tells us we're sinful to our core. All throughout Romans, we hear how all have fallen short of the glory of God. We are all sinful. We earned it. So that moral state that you are, that I am, that total depravity, we earned that. And everybody here is in that same room together, that same group together. We earned that. But subjective shame, on the other hand, is not always earned. See, there's things that have been done that you've done to others. You earned that. There's things that have been done to you. You did nothing to deserve it. And I think that's key for a lot of you, for many of you, who are struggling with shame because you've been abused, because you've been sinned against sexually. Something's been done to you, and you go back in your head and you think, I must have earned it somehow. I must not have been good enough. I must have been too ugly. I wasn't popular enough. I wasn't sexually active enough. I wasn't a good enough daughter, good enough son. Maybe I sort of wanted it. And you go back and you start to allow Satan to accuse you. That shame, that subjective shame, was not earned. And I think it's an important distinction this morning. Being the victim of sexual assault, usually, many times I find, and I've read, results in subjective shame that you did not earn. You were a victim. You were sinned against. And so I hope that you'll be listening this morning for how the gospel can bring healing to that situation. You do not need to be defined by sin committed against you. In other words, you don't need to, your entire life, you don't need to be that victim. You don't need to be defined by that shame and by that guilt that has been imposed upon you. That is the message of the gospel. That is why prostitutes, that is why the abused, that is why the sinners, that is why the drunks, that is why the tax collectors, that is why the heathens, that is why the pagans, that is why the sinful people in the scriptures loved Jesus so much. That is why religious people were so angry with Jesus, is because he brought this message and said, you don't need to be defined by that shame any longer. You don't need to be accused by that shame any longer. That sin against you brought disgrace. I bring grace and I kill that disgrace. And Jesus says, I bring you a new identity, a new creation. That's why he says you're walking out of death and into life when you believe in him. Many of you feel that shame. You feel the death. You feel like something's been ripped out of you, like your heart has been broken and trampled on and smashed. And Jesus says, I bring new life to that situation. I bring a new identity to the broken.